Hey, let's see here. Hello. Okay, I think we're on. Hello, and welcome to this week's live stream. Today we are talking about the super annoying. Oops, I forgot to turn on lights. It's live. Okay, there we go. We are talking about the most annoying communication issue, basically, that we all deal with, which is feeling like we are just not getting heard by our partners. This is so frustrating. And so if you have been feeling lately like you're trying to talk and communicate and make your feelings known, but your words are just falling on deaf ears, or if it's like they're kind of hearing you, but they are not understanding you, which is not much better, honestly. This is for you. Today's live stream is for you. And I really wanted to do this topic today because this week on Love, Happiness, and Success, we dove into this. This past week's podcast, I gave you a lot of information around what's going on behind this phenomenon. But today we are gathered together to talk about your questions related to this. So if this is going on in your relationship, in your communication, it feels like you are just not getting through and you are sick of it, I want to hear what's going on so that I can help you. So feel free to ask your questions. You can hop into the comments right here and we'll dive into what's going on. If you would like to ask a question anonymously, you are welcome to do that through a thing that I put together on my website. Here, I'll push this out to you so that you get it. Okay, so I just sent the link in the comments so that you can ask your question. Some people are fine, like, here's what's going on in my relationship through this forum, but I have had a number of people reach out to me to say, I want to tell you what's going on, but I want it to be more confidential. So I put together this little thing so that you can ask a question confidentially at growingself.com/dear-Lisa. So before we jump into questions, I want to take just a minute to do a super quick recap of what I talked about in this past week's podcast, just in case you missed it. So let me pull up a couple of things that I put together for you, and we're going to dive right in. Okay, we are going to go. Sorry, I have all these little nifty bells and whistles and gadgets and things on my computer, and I put together a tiny little presentation. So let's just flip into this. Okay, I hope you can see that. So on the subject of how to be heard, quick recap. You need to know and here's why, because in order to fix this problem, you need to have some sense of what is contributing to the problem. Because in my experience, there can be a few different things that could be leading you to have this experience in your relationship. And if you're not clear on what that is, like the underlying issue, you won't know how to act to fix it. So in general, here is what's going on. First of all, one of the most common situations is if you are in a relationship with somebody who has this like fix-it mentality. So you might be talking about something that is going on with you or some change that you would like to see in your relationship, and your partner, for usually in my experience, good intention, goes into this fix-it mode of, okay, here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to solve the problem. Or sometimes this can even turn into like a passive-aggressive kind of like agreeing with you, but then there's no follow-through or movement after that, which can also actually be like a type of conflict avoidance, or in their mind, it's a way of fixing the present moment when maybe you're talking about things that are hard for them to hear and that they'd rather not engage with. So there's this anxiety that can come into your partner that's typically rooted in this discomfort with feelings and this desire to make whatever is happening better, but will lead you feeling like you're not getting heard in the relationship, that you either don't get to talk all the way through about how you feel, or have it seem like your partner is genuinely absorbing the truth of what you're saying. They're just kind of rushing to the conclusion, which can lead you feeling deeply unsatisfied with how that communication is going. And I think we've all had that experience, and it's hard. But another reason that conflictual, or I should say that you may feel unheard, is that if you are trying to talk about how you feel and sharing something that is important to you, and it is turning into a conflict, there's conflictual communication that kind of flares up, that will obstruct your ability to feel like whatever you're saying is landing with your partner, because it turns into this battle kind of experience. You start maybe escalating, trying harder to make yourself known, and it turns into this power struggle over who's right and who's wrong. And at the end of the day, it's just a fight, and you walk away from that feeling like you are still not understood because this conflict kind of, blew away everything that you were trying to say. So that's another thing that can be going on here, and frequently is. Additionally, and this I think is something that we should all be more aware of. And if you're a regular listener of Love, Happiness, and Success, you've heard me talk about this on previous episodes, but that emotional intelligence, like there is a spectrum of high EI or emotional intelligence and low emotional intelligence. People with high emotional intelligence are good at a few different things. They know how they feel, they can manage themselves, but they also have a lot of psychological mindedness and empathy. They can really understand what somebody else is feeling. They can read through the lines even, and they're also really good at like knowing how to respond in ways that leave whoever they're talking to for the better, and feeling like, oh, this person gets me. And this is really a skill set. Yeah, maybe there are some natural abilities, but people who are good at this are usually good at it because they've developed this ability. Whereas people with lower EI struggle with all of those things. They don't know how they feel. They have a hard time managing their own emotions. They often don't have a ton of insight into the hearts and minds of other people. And even if they do, sometimes they don't know how to respond to that in ways that is gratifying for the other person and leaves the other person really with that sense of, yeah, they got me. And so if you are in a relationship with somebody who is on that lower end of the EI spectrum, you could have different experiences in that area. And again, it's not because they don't want to understand you. It's because they almost don't have the skill set to have the kind of conversation with you that will help you feel understood by them. So there's something there. And then lastly, and I think that this is oftentimes one of the most common reasons that people feel unheard in their relationships, is really if there is disagreement. So maybe not conflict, maybe it doesn't turn into a fight, but you are talking about something, you are trying to be heard on a topic that your partner actually just disagrees with. You are perhaps advocating for something, a position, a course of action. I think we should do XYZ, or I'd like this to be different. And your partner actually has a different point of view. They want something that is different than what you want. You are not in alignment. And so even though it's not turning into a battle, you are very entrenched in your position. They are entrenched in theirs. And it feels like you cannot influence them, and probably vice versa. So it's that I'm not being heard is often code for they are not agreeing with me. I am not able to influence them to bend in my direction, and I would like that to happen, and that feels frustrating to me. And so the reason why I just wanted to walk through these is because each of these different issues that are underlying the experience of not being heard, they have different solutions. You have to handle these things differently in order to improve the communication in your relationship. relationship. And so let's just jump into this for a second. I'm going to give you a quick recap of very general strategies that I talked about on this week's podcast to change this dynamic. But then I really, really want to hear about your questions and what is going on in your relationship. So if you have questions, if you're like, yeah, this is happening in my relationship, I would love to know what has been happening so that I can speak to it. I might ask you a couple follow-up questions just to get some clarity here. You can put your questions for me right in the comments and we'll talk about it here in real time. If you would like to do this anonymously, you can also use that link that I shared. Go to growingself.com/dear-Lisa. Explain the situation, the communication issues in your relationship, and let's see if we can find something that will help you. So very quickly, and I want to go into general solutions first with the understanding that, you are an individual person in an individual relationship, and this could be different from you. But in general, the things that will help versus make it worse. Okay, so our natural tendency, all of us, myself included, is that when we're feeling unheard and starting to feel frustrated about that, the tendency is to escalate. We get activated, we talk louder, we become more passionate or more of an advocate for our point of view, right? And when you go into that pursuer position, it leads to a relational dynamic that will impact communication negatively. Actually, okay, so a new free resource for you on this, if you want to learn more about this negative communication cycle and how to fix it, I actually put together a brand new free resource for you recently. It just launched this week. Finally, I'm so excited about it. But I mentioned it on the podcast, and I will drop the link to it here in the comments. It's called Communication That Connects. It is totally free. It is a free 2-part training series with me, a couple of video lessons. I put together a nice workbook for you with a lot of different exercises. But in this, we go into that dynamic, that pursue, withdraw. One person gets escalated and the impact that has on the other, and vice versa. What impact it has in a relationship when one person is withdrawn, isn't participating in conversations, is avoidant or defensive, because that impacts the system as well. So I don't want to do a deep dive into all of that here in this live stream, but I did want to put that free resource in front of you so that you can learn more about that, because it's a really common issue that impacts communication in relationships. But when it comes to what to do when you're feeling frustrated and like your partner just isn't hearing you, instead of escalating, first spend some time doing what we're doing right this very second, which is diagnosing the issue, like getting clear, or as clear as you can on your own, about why this is happening in the first place, like what's contributing to the problem. And then with that, get really curious about what might be going on with your partner, and try to have a conversation with them about it. And in this conversation, you are not talking about the thing that you're trying to be heard and understood about, but we're talking about the process, to be able to say things like, I've noticed that when I try to talk to you about XYZ, it feels like that doesn't go anywhere, or that you're struggling to hear what I'm saying, or that maybe you don't like what I'm saying. And I do not want to fight about that. We do not need to go back into that issue. But I am so curious, like, what happens inside of you when I approach you in this way, because I love you. I want to have a good relationship with you. I want our communication to be better. And so, like, what's going on? And then, wait for them to tell you the answer if they will engage in that conversation with you. And don't argue with them. Really, like, you want to be heard. That's the goal. And so sometimes in order to change dynamics in our relationship, we have to be the change that we are seeking. And so this is an opportunity for you to hear and really help them feel heard and understood by you, essentially giving them what you would like to have. And And then if you want to get real fancy, you can have an experiential moment where you're like, what was that just like for you? You told me how you were feeling, and I intentionally responded to you in a way that I hope helped you feel heard and appreciated and loved by me. What was that like for you? And they'll probably say, kind of awesome. And then it turns into a conversation about the solutions and the things that you can both be doing on each side that are taking into consideration what your partner has just told you about what's going on for them in that moment, but also, with that kind of tone, that sort of environment, they will probably be more receptive to employing some solutions on their side too. So those are some things that you might consider in general, of course. But I'm here to talk about you and your relationship and your questions. So I'd love to roll into this. I did have some questions come in advance prior to this live stream. So we're going to tackle a couple of those first. But I also really want to hear about what's going on in your life. And so if communication has been feeling frustrating lately, tell me more about it. Give me enough details so that I can help diagnose the issue, and then we can talk about meaningful solutions that will hopefully help you turn this around and start to make this better again. Okay, so let's talk about Sarah. Sarah is a fictitious name because she got in touch with me through that confidential form that I mentioned. But I like to give people a name anyway. So let's talk to Sarah. Okay. So dear Lisa, my partner and I have been together for 5 years, but lately it feels like he never listens to me. Every time I try to talk about my day or my feelings or basically anything, he just seems distracted or uninterested. And so what can I do to make him pay attention and show me that he cares, feel like that he cares? So fantastic question. And I will just share with you really transparently that when I read Sarah's question, the first thing, honestly, that came up for me was wondering if Sarah's boyfriend might have, or partner, I should say, might have an ADHD diagnosis. There's just something about the way that she's describing that experience where he seems distracted or kind of preoccupied or lost in his own thing or there. Yeah. Oh, he never listens to me. So lost in his own things. And this is a different thing. And so this wasn't in the list of usual suspects that we ran down in the beginning of the show, but this is super real. And I will share, even just from my personal experience, as a human who has ADHD, this is something that I have to be really intentional about in my relationship because I can do this to my husband if I'm not careful. And so some advice that I would have for this writer are a couple of different things. First of all, especially if you have a partner who might have ADHD, they may be preoccupied by their own thoughts. It might be difficult for them to focus intentionally on what is being said for long periods of time. And also they may have a bunch of different things going on in their minds. And so we have to manage that. But additionally, the way that Sarah described this, another thing came up for me too, which would, really be a question for her, but it's around what is Sarah doing in the moments that she is trying to engage with her partner? So for example, is her partner working from home and typing at the computer and trying to do things? Is he actually doing something else? And Sarah is trying to engage in conversations with him when he's actually not in a place when he can hear her. And so there are a lot of variables to consider, internal things for the partner, but also what kind of visibility does Sarah have into success strategies that are going to help her get better results when she tries to communicate? So either way, the things that I would be thinking about is to, first of all, have a conversation like that process conversation that we talked about, for Sarah to be able to say, not about any one thing, but about more generally, I've noticed that when I try to talk to you, just, randomly, it feels like a lot of times you're kind of checked out. And it is important for me to feel like we're connecting emotionally, and talking to you is one of my love languages. It's like part of how I make that happen. And I would love, just to feel like you're being more present with me. So, I have some ideas maybe about how we can make that happen. But first of all, I'm curious to hear about what those moments are like for you. Like, do you know what I'm talking about? And he's like, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I was actually trying to finish a work presentation and I was up against a deadline, and I was like trying to do 9 different things. And you came into my home office, started to talk to me. And I really couldn't like drop everything and talk to you and pay attention to you, because I was like in the shizzle, right? And so that could be something that comes out of the conversation. Or Sarah's partner could say, you know what, you're right. Sometimes, especially at the end of the day, I feel like I have a pinball machine going on inside of my head, like a video game, right? And especially, like thinking about all these different things and, intrusive thoughts popping into my head. And it is really so hard for me to stay present with you sometimes, because of like this internal battle that I'm fighting against my own thoughts. And so that turns into a conversation about, what could we do differently? And I know that, like in my house, I sometimes need my husband to say to me, I need to talk to you about something important. So that me, as somebody with ADHD, like I put down my phone, I look right at him with my eyes open and like focus, like try really hard to focus on what he is saying. And I make eye contact. And while he's talking, I nod my head to show him that I understand. And sometimes, especially at the end of the day when I'm tired, my thoughts still do wander and I have to pull them back intentionally. And my husband is a talker. That is part of how he connects emotionally. And because we've had these conversations together, I know that about him. And I know that I need to be present with him. And so we're kind of managing this together. And still sometimes, he is patient with me. Sometimes we'll be talking and I'll just sort of like drift off and he'll be like, where did you just go? And I'll be like, well, actually, I just started thinking about XYZ, and can come back and like finish the conversation. So that is a strategy. And then also other times, I think that there are times in many relationships, this is true for me, that my husband will start talking to me while I am doing something. I'm trying to figure something out. I'm sending a text. I'm sending a work email on my phone, and he's starting to talk to me. And I'm like, I need to finish something. Can I connect with you in like 10 minutes, right? So that can also be a really good strategy, is just to have more open communication about the process and about the things that you can each do. Some couples, and I've seen this work really well for a lot of people too, have also developed rituals of connection where they have intentional times together during the day, either in the morning or in the evening or a daytime break, where they are connecting, getting together for the purpose of talking with the intention of understanding each other. And this is a dedicated time where you can talk to each other about stuff that's going on, and the expectation is that nobody's looking at phones. We're not watching TV. We are just here with each other, seeking to understand. And that can be a really special time for a lot of couples. So those are some of my thoughts for Sarah. But thank you so much for asking that fantastic question. Who else is dealing with communication issues? I can see all kinds of fun people here. And hello, I'm so glad that you're joining me today. I'm glad that you're here for this conversation. And I don't know if you had a chance to check out the podcast on Monday on this topic, or if you did, what your thoughts were, or if you have anything going on in your relationship that has been leading you to feel frustrated with your communication, so that we can talk about it. You're welcome to leave your questions for me right here in the comments, or if you would like to do so anonymously, you can use that web form that I shared, growingself.com/Dear Lisa. And in case you're just joining, I also shared a new communication resource that I just made available earlier this week. It is totally free. It is a 2-part training series that actually does a pretty deep dive into some negative communication dynamics. It talks about the 6 pillars of healthy communication and how to start improving all of them. And so it's 2 free videos with me, a big workbook that I put together for you that has a lot of free resources, exercises, additional information, some like self-assessments that you can work through and also do with your partner. You can do it by yourself or with your partner. And so if you want to grab that, it's at growingself.com/communication. But again, totally free. And I think it's a pretty robust training. So I hope you take advantage of that. Okay. So another question came in. I thought that this was a juicy one. And I was so glad that somebody asked me this question because this is the kind of thing that I hear in marriage counseling sessions, to be completely honest with you. But so this writer shared, I've tried talking to my wife about how stressed I am at work and how it is impacting my mental health. But it seems like she doesn't want to hear me. She just changes the subject or like tells me to get over it in a way that feels really hurtful to me. So the question is, how can I get her to listen to me and take me seriously? And I think that that's the core of it, is that it feels like this person is coming to his partner with a very real need for emotional intimacy, right? And is feeling like there's like just bouncing off of her, like he needs to get over it or she is just not interested, like actually changing the subject. And so can you hear the difference? Like with the first questioner, that was really like there's something going on with the attention or the focus or being distracted. But this one is like, I don't want to hear it, is what the vibe is to me. And so there are a couple of things that could be going on. And again, like I would need to know a little bit more and would love to ask this person some more questions. But like one of the things that I'm most curious about is this person's wife really uncomfortable with dark emotions? Like obviously the writer is trying to connect on an emotional level and is coming to his partner with like bids for connection. Like, let me tell you what's going on. It's like this desire to create emotional intimacy. And so like, I guess I would be curious, like, what is happening inside of her when he does that? And so going back to some of the things, like, does she have lower emotional intelligence and like does not know how to handle this? Does she feel uncomfortable with his emotionality and even subconsciously feels like she has to shut that down? Right? Like, ooh, this feels dangerous or uncomfortable to me. I would be very curious to know if that was tied to like older, like more historical family of origin stuff. So I would be curious to know more about that. But additionally, I would also be wondering how the writer was showing up. Because again, you have to remember that relationships are systems. And so we have our perspective of what is happening in the relationship system, but oftentimes have much less visibility into ourselves and how we may be impacting that relationship system. So like one of my questions for the writer is like, well, give me an example of what it sounds like when you are trying to talk to your wife about your feelings. And like, if I was a fly on the wall, what would I hear you saying? And it could be that it is feels, dumping on her with this big laundry list of complaints and negativity, and then this awful thing happened, and I hate my job so much, and I hate my boss so much, and that this happens a lot. It could be that his wife is actually feeling really frustrated with a lot of complaining and a lot of negativity and not having any conversation about solutions. Maybe she is a more solution-oriented person who has heard all this stuff 100 times, and that's now in a place where like, what are you going to do about it, dude? Right? And so that actually makes it hard for her to stay in the ring with him when he wants to basically like keep trauma dumping, because to her, it feels like enabling his stuckness. So that's why we need to get curious about what's actually happening on the other side. And I don't know that that's happening, but I don't know that it's not happening. So that's the kind of thing that I would encourage this writer to ask his wife more about. So when I try to talk to you about how I'm feeling and like these terrible days that I'm having at work, I feel like you're just not interested in hearing it. Why is that? And it could be because you are just constantly complaining, not doing anything to change it. I don't want to hear it anymore. But it could also be, it makes me really uncomfortable when you feel upset. It could lead to, more emotionally connected conversation if she's able to, use higher emotional intelligence skills to be able to say, you know what? This, for whatever reason, I start to feel shut down. When you start going there, I know that you're upset. I know these things are important to you, but I feel just like frozen inside. And I really don't know how to connect with you in these moments. I just feel like I need to get away from this whole thing as fast as I can. And it probably has something to do with my alcoholic, abusive dad. Like, could be that. I don't know. But there can be so much stuff here. And I will also say, just generally speaking, that when people do have like more entrenched avoidant patterns, particularly if it's related to older stuff, it can be difficult to even have a meaningful conversation about the process because people are like, stop. And so this would be a really good reason to get involved with a very good couples counselor who can help you start to peel that onion and get to the bottom of it. You'll want to look for a licensed marriage and family therapist. So that is a very specialized kind of therapist who has specific education, training, and experience in the kind of relational issues that we're talking about, and knowing that most therapists are not that. So frequently when you go to a garden variety therapist with relational issues, it turns into something different because what basic therapists know how to do is diagnose and treat mental health conditions. And so you want to come in and talk about communication dynamics, and it could go to all kinds of different places that may not be appropriate. So to straighten out communication issues, go to a licensed marriage and family therapist, ideally one who has a strong background in relationship coaching, who can help you diagnose a situation, but then also turn it into, okay, here's what to do differently in a concrete way that can help you have a different experience at the end of it, because just talking about things also doesn't change stuff. Of course, if you would like to do that, work with my practice, Growing Self, you're welcome to growingself.com and help yourself to a free consultation with one of the experts on my team. We are here for you. So I hope that helps. Okay, so let's jump into another listener question. This one, fantastic. Let's see. Here's a good one. Okay, you guys, let's talk about this. So, hi, thank you so much for joining today. This is such a good question. And the question is, how do you validate your partner if they are attacking you with false accusations? Yeah. So, I don't know if you're still here, but like, I would be curious, like, what kind of false accusations are we talking about right now? Like, just to get a little bit more clear on what is happening. But this is coming up for me. This is making me wonder. There's like assessment to do is this an abusive relationship where you're being emotionally abused by this person who is not somebody that you can have a healthy conversation with, because that is a different problem that needs to be dealt with in a different way. It would also make me wonder if this is one of the situations that we talked about at the very beginning of this live stream. And I don't know if you were here when we first started talking, but one of the things that can impact this and lead people to feel unheard is when there are actual real disagreements at the core of this. So for example, if you are talking about something and wanting your partner to hear you and understand your point of view, and they have an extremely different perspective, and it feels like they start fighting with you about whose version of reality is the correct one. Like, I see that happen all the time, and I'm wondering if that could be what's going on here, where you feel attacked with false accusations. So yeah, like, I would need to know more. So the false accusations, like, what are the false accusations? Is it that you are cheating on them? Thinking thoughts about other men, doing something that you are not doing? Like, yeah. What is that? I mean, it could be a process conversation around it. It sounds like you have a lot of anxiety, that you're really worried about XYZ, or it sounds like, you've developed a narrative that I am doing these things that I can assure you are not true. But it feels like when I tried to tell you that, it doesn't sink in. But honestly, I think that this might be a situation that you should take in front of a very competent marriage counselor, provided that it isn't an actually abusive relationship. And I'll just say this for everybody, if you are in an abusive relationship, you can't go to couples counseling, because it's actually not safe for you to try to work on the relationship with somebody who is abusive and who has not yet done substantial, specific work to correct what is ever going on inside of them that is leading them to behave in an abusive way. So, like, for example, if somebody shows up for marriage counseling with me and starts describing an abusive patterns in a relationship, I won't work with them. You refer each person for individual therapy, and then, come back and let's see how that's going when you make changes individually. And then maybe we could talk about making positive changes to the relationship. But in this situation, you might want to get like an assessment, like take it in front of a competent marriage and family therapist to get a better sense of what's going on. But also, if your partner is just like dealing with a powerful false mindset or unhelpful core beliefs, or even irrational beliefs that are like they're not thinking correctly, you may also need the support of a really good therapist to figure out what's going on and see if there is something that can be done that can help them calm down or take on board your point of view. But this one might honestly be really tough to do on your own. So anyway, I don't know if that is helpful, but the action step here would be to make an appointment with a good marriage and family therapist. Again, welcome to come to growingself.com if you'd like to try that with us, but even one locally in your area could be a good choice. Okay, so let's dive into another question. Oh my goodness. Michael is with us and related. He said, I'm not perfect, but often approached my wife to discuss my feelings and was told to figure it out or get over it, which directly negatively impacted your emotional connection with her. And so, and then you also added, but she is also super solution-based, so I can understand your other points too. Yeah, so I'm glad that you were here for this conversation, because first of all, I can totally understand how invalidating this would feel. Like, if you are an emotional person, you're a passionate person, you're going through stuff, and part of your like love language is talking about it, and your wife is not willing to participate in that with you in a meaningful way that feels to you, like it is emotionally connected, that is a huge barrier to emotional intimacy. And you mentioned that it was really impacting your emotional connection. And I can completely understand why, that you would feel unloved, uncared for, like she's not in this with you. I would imagine you feeling kind of alone because of that. So totally get it. And, you're also bringing up that she is super solution focused and maybe has a low tolerance for engaging in emotionally intimate conversations. She wants to jump into that fix it, right? And that is incredibly emotionally invalidating, even though I'm sure that she is well-meaning. But a couple of resources here for you that could be helpful. First of all, totally grab that free communication training that I was telling you about. So on my website, growingself.com/communication, see if your wife might take this with you, because it's a very low-key, non-threatening way to potentially give her some visibility into how her way of relating to you is impacting you. Because I think that frequently people who engage in these patterns, it's typically coming from their culture of origin. Like maybe she came from a family, and I'm just like making stuff up. I don't know your wife, but I would wonder if she came from a family where people were more emotionally distant. There wasn't a lot of value placed on emotionally intimate conversations. Maybe they had a more of a fix-it mentality, like we don't talk about that, we just change it, like whatever it was. But in my experience, people who engage with us often legitimately don't understand how they are impacting other people emotionally, because in their mind, from their perspective, they're behaving very appropriately. They're trying to solve problems. They're trying to make things better. They're trying to, take a more positive point of view, or like, well, let's try this instead, and having no idea that they're being super invalidating. So check out that free communication course. Also, on my website, if you go to my blog and podcast, hold on, wait a minute. I pulled something up for you guys. I'm just going to share my screen with you for 1 second. Okay. So, no, I don't think that worked. All right. Never mind. What I was going to do was try to share a resource with you. If you come to my website, growingself.com, and if you come to my blog and podcast, so growingself.com, blog and podcast is right there in the main nav. Go to the love collection. And then from there, I have a content collection. So all kinds of articles, podcasts that I've recorded, like a podcast playlist on the subject of communication. The content collection you're looking for is actually called Communication That Connects. And what I want you to find, or you could even use the search bar at the bottom of my site for this, a resource that I have around emotional invalidation. There's a big article, there's a podcast, I've done a live stream on this topic in the past. But even if you could send this to her or listen to this podcast with her, again, just to like help her get visibility into what this is like for you in a way that she might just like absorb a little differently, that could potentially go a long way, because my sense is that she just really doesn't understand literally what would help you feel more loved, or she doesn't know how to participate that in this with you. And also, just on the bright side here, this could be a really powerful growth moment for your wife, potentially. Like maybe she hasn't ever been in a relationship that challenged her in this way. Maybe she didn't have opportunities when she was growing up to have these kinds of emotionally intimate conversations. And so that she right now does not have the skills and abilities to know how to do that with you. But particularly if you guys do this growth work together, either through some of the free resources that I shared, or if you wanted to get into relationship coaching, this could actually be an amazing new chapter for her. Because in my experience too, that when people allow themselves to open up and have a meaningful experience, it can be really, really powerful. And at the end of this, she may be incredibly grateful to you for helping both of you grow in this direction, because it could lead lead to a lot more emotional intimacy in your relationship overall if she's willing to do this work with you. So thank you for sharing your question and your experience. And I'm really glad that you're here today with us because this is awesome. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we just addressed a question a few minutes ago related to somebody who was struggling. Here was the original question about how do I, communicate with my partner and validate them when it feels like they are accusing me of things. And I was like, I need more information. And you wrote again to mention like flirting with people is what you're being falsely accused of. And you also said you try to de-escalate and be understanding, but can't say, yeah, I see why you would feel that way, because that feels like it would be false, like admitting to something that you're absolutely not doing. And so again, though, going back to what we were talking about a bit ago, like there is something else here. Like where is that coming from? Do they have a history of betrayal trauma? Is there some kind of anxiety disorder that is fueling this? Because if this is just absolutely not happening and they are stuck on this obsessive thought that like, no, you're cheating on me or you're flirting. I mean, like, what is going on with that? What is making them think that way? What are their expectations of you? So a lot to explore. And again, get this in front of a marriage counselor, because is this just being fueled by their own anxiety? Or, other things that I would just be generally curious about. What are their expectations? Like, are you guys coming from two different cultures? I've seen this before, where one person is coming from a culture of origin that is extremely conservative. Women do not talk to men. There are boundaries and kind of rules about what appropriate behavior should be, whereas in other cultures, there can be a lot more freedom. It may be that you are a really friendly, beautiful, vivacious, charismatic, outgoing person who is an extrovert and likes talking to people. And so, you are talking to people and talking to men and asking them questions and smiling and laughing at their jokes. And, is that I wonder if some men interpret you being friendly and chatty and amazing as flirtatious behavior, because I think sometimes in our culture, and I hate to gender categorize, but what I have seen is that sometimes men are like, if a woman is smiling at me and talking to me and laughing at my jokes and asking me questions, that's flirting. Like that means she's into me, right? So I don't know, but those are curiosity questions. Like, can you find out? Like, what is that about? So expectations that are different. He's uncomfortable, like he's feeling threatened some way. Is it related to old anxiety or trauma? Or is it that, I don't know, is he feeling insecure in your relationship? There's a lot here that is worth unpacking. And this is just me spitballing and speculating without having a lot more information. But I could understand how what is happening here right now in this relationship feels real unsustainable for you and needs to be different. And so I seriously hope that this conversation has given you some direction on where to go to start getting help and correcting this, because I could imagine that this does not feel sustainable for you, understandably. Okay, so let's see what else is going on. And I think we probably have time for one more question. Follow-up comment. Yes, it sounds like her parents' relationship, and she has an anxious attachment. Oh, excuse me. Thank you for. I shouldn't assume that she has anxious attachment. Yeah, so that makes a lot of sense to me, and it seems like it makes a lot of sense to you too. And that's one of the things that's true about humans in general. I mean, people always make sense, even if somebody is behaving in very odd ways. Why are you doing this? When you dial down and get all the information. People always make sense. I actually had a very wise, experienced clinical supervisor who would say that frequently. We would do case consultation. That's part of the process of becoming a licensed marriage and family therapist, is that you talk about cases with an experienced AAMFT approved clinical supervisor who specializes in marriage and family therapy to kind of unpack all of this. And that's what counselor trainees do, marriage and family therapist counselors trainees do. And I would say, I just don't know what's going on. And she would be like, it's because you don't have all the information. And so when we can kind of get to the core and understand, then we can begin identifying solutions and begin the process of growth and healing that can ultimately make this better. And just an additional resource for you, if you go to my blog and podcast, or even use the search bar, I have recorded a number of podcasts on attachment styles and especially anxious attachment styles. I think one you might want to check out is how to feel more secure in a relationship. There was another one a few months ago called When Anxious Meets Avoidant. Not saying that you're avoidant, but that just kind of does a deeper dive into what the experience of somebody with an anxious attachment style is like. And that might be interesting for you, actually, to get more insight into how she probably feels. So anyway, I hope that those help you. And they're on my website. They're free. And so I hope you check those out. Okay, you guys, one more question. All right. Hi, Mary. I'm glad you're here with us today. So question is, can you please share some advice for separating parents? My sister and brother-in-law have broken up. He was having a 2.5-year affair. He was being the worst person in the world and cannot be reasoned with. So I think you're asking on behalf of your sister how she could potentially get through to her ex that he cannot be reasoned with. I mean, just stating very bluntly, I don't know that he can be reasoned with. I mean, I think that the things that we're talking about on today's live stream and on the podcast, makes the core assumption that there are two people who are in a relationship with each other that they both care about, right? Because to show up in a different way in a relationship, to change some of the things that you're doing for the benefit of the relationship, like the primary prerequisite is that you care enough about the relationship and about the other person to do that work. And in a situation like the one that you're describing, I don't know that that is possible. And so it could be that what your sister has now is trying to build a life and create a new reality that cannot be dependent on him understanding her at this point. And so this may be that there are legal boundaries that are being, shared by a judge or a mediator potentially, where somebody else is saying, and this is what you need to be doing. And if you don't do that, there will be consequences. That could potentially get their attention and create compliance. But I just don't know how much leverage your sister would have otherwise with somebody who has been operating in this way. So this isn't a new thing. He didn't just get weird when they got divorced. He was having an affair for 2.5 years prior to this, which also tells me that there's an empathy piece missing, and that he probably feels pretty entitled to do whatever he wants, which again is not compatible with being able to take influence from another person that you care about. So I don't mean to be super negative and hopeless, but this doesn't feel like a relationship issue to me. This feels more like a legal issue to me. But I could be wrong. Again, I don't have a ton of information about the situation, so there could be complexities or nuances here. I do have an additional free resource. I have recorded a couple of podcasts, actually, with very good family law attorneys, and who shared their advice. And one in particular I will share was this was a couple of years ago. But if you go to my site, growingself.com, and search for it, I believe the title was Amicable Divorce. And it talks about, certainly things that you can do in the situation to support everybody getting on the same page, but also a seasoned family law attorney sharing her perspective on what the limits of that can be and how to cope with that. For many people, it's very hard to let go of having control or say over the experience of their children when they're in the custody of the other parent. Like that kind of stuff can be so tough, but she offers some resources for dealing with that. But also, a just last piece of advice is that if your sister isn't already, I would highly recommend you encourage her to get into a relationship with a very good therapist, ideally a marriage and family therapist who understands divorce dynamics, these relational dynamics, but also who has a strong background in divorce and breakup recovery specifically, because there is an arc of growth and healing through that life experience that is really different, again, than garden variety therapy, where we're doing the diagnosis and treatment of mental health conditions. Because based on what you're saying, I did not hear that was part of your sister's story. Again, she needs somebody who is competent to help her through this process and figuring out the boundaries that she is going to set and how she is going to deal with this new reality is going to be a big piece of that for her. So again, if you want to go to growingself.com, we have a section on our site about divorce and breakup recovery if you want to learn more about that, and a lot of free resources to help people with that as well. Okay, you guys, I think that is probably about all the time that we have together today. But thank you so much for doing this with me. I am digging our time together. I love these live streams. I know we took a little break last week for the 4th of July holiday, but I'm going to be here every Wednesday, or Thursday, I should say, talking about the episodes, the topics that we discuss on episodes of Love, Happiness, and Success. So if you're not already subscribed to the Love, Happiness, and Success podcast, please do so. Spotify, iTunes. You can also connect on YouTube, obviously, and certainly, all the socials. So we're always posting about that week's topic. And I'm going to be inviting your questions in advance if you'd like to share them. And then we'll talk about it on Thursdays together. So anyway, thanks for being part of this, and I will talk to you next week. Okay, take care, everybody.